$100 million in leverage financing, non-repayable loans, and cost of production, feasibility study, assumptions. These are kind of our bread and butter. So I'm looking forward to diving into wild blueberries with you guys here. Um, in terms of cost of production, and there's going to be some common themes here this morning to just kind of weave a message in. If they say a quality presenter will help the audience kind of retain roughly 10% of what's said. So I'm going to say the same thing a couple times, and hopefully you get a nugget out of it. Just like at church on Sundays, I tell myself, okay, I'm going to get one thing this morning. I'm taking this home, so I'm hopeful that you can kind of get at least one thing here today. So when we look at cost of production, there's operational costs, capital costs, and they do both kind of work in tandem. But I think often the capital costs or the kind of non-operational invoice producing costs can kind of get missed in the sense of you've got your land development, your opportunity costs of your land, equipment depreciation, and owner operator labor. That's one that at the end of the day, sometimes when you talk to a farmer about, how much they pay themselves, it can be kind of, oh, well, whatever's left at the end of the year type of thing. But if you were to actually allocate a dollar value on the time spent and build it into your cost of production, there would be a material impact to profitability. Cost of production is something that I can really anchor your decision making. You can be kind of more based on fact, less based on feeling. Will this investment return on capital? Should I be applying this level of inputs to, enhance yield by this to generate additional revenue per acre? Again, it's more fact-based, less feeling-based, and a message that I would say too when it comes to cost of production, or when it comes to really any kind of management decisions, it's going to be garbage in, garbage out, essentially. So if you're not on top of your record keeping and you don't have, and it doesn't need to be some extravagant system, but something that you can reliably use to consistently capture the information, that's really the only way that you're actually going to be able to make these decisions, is if you have a longevity of data to support you. So whatever those systems are internally, if you have something that's working great, I've seen a number of different systems, but really it is garbage in, garbage out. We need to make sure that we get the appropriate information. So really, like I say, when we're talking operational and capital, this would be kind of reflective of an income statement. So, you're kind of looking at, you've got maybe more like your gross margin on a cash operating cost of production, accounting operating cost of production. You're looking at more kind of net margin. And then really the full economic cost is really what I think gets missed. Most people will kind of live in the top there in that survival threshold of kind of generally understanding or allocating their cost of production. But it is really important to consider the non-cash related impacts to your operation and cost of production in terms of, again, your time and your return on capital. So in kind of looking through wild blueberries, and like I say, my team and I, we work with a number of different commodities. I'm based in Kemptville, so the Valley, we've got a ton of different commodities there. Not too much wild blueberry though. So in kind of researching for this presentation here, there are definitely some market factors and general operational dynamics that you folks are working with that make the cost of production difficult to put your finger on and really leverage. You're working with a biennial cycle. So you've got a field and it's generating income one every 2 years. Also, you're kind of developing that field over a period of time, and we might not even know exactly to what level of development that field will get. So what output can we even expect on that field? We can't fully predict going into it. And then you do have that gap of time in the development cycle where you're incurring costs and generating no revenue. So there is some complexity there. Pollination is another one that what is the appropriate amount of hives to stimulate yield? What is the right price to allocate to hives? Are there going to be the available amount of hives when I need the hives? These are some questions. And then when you look at your fields, we're not looking at just kind of a uniform yield base. You've got a range of yield factors and complexities associated with each field that can then, if you look at kind of a farm cost of production, it's not actually reflective of a true cost of production per field, is where we need to get more granular. You've got real timing sensitivity, and that is, in agriculture, we need to, make hay while the sun shines and, leverage the rain, and hopefully there's not too much rain, and is there going to be any rain? There's a lot of timing sensitivity, so to be able to work within the defined windows to be able to, maximize the return on your inputs, maximize your yield potential. That is another factor. And then, like I say, this kind of ties into the biennial cycle, but you're looking at a market structure where, I'm planning today for my harvest in, next 2027, trying to understand what the price could be and what I should kind of work towards there and plan for, adds another layer of complexity in the reality that you folks are dealing in. So if kind of a basic formula in looking at it would be, and this is more the operational cost of production, the 2-year costs divided by pounds, paid pounds. So, you've got your sprout year, your crop year, the direct costs, labor. Again, I would really encourage you to kind of keep abreast of the time that's spent yourself, even if you're not necessarily paying yourself that hourly wage, but input that into your cost of production, equipment maintenance, but also depreciation costs. You've got land costs, imputed rental value, your overhead, interest, finance costs, divided by your paid pounds. And that kind of gives you a general starting point. And you could draw this from your income statements generally. But again, we will then be faced with looking at it on a farm level. I would really like to dive into field level, but that would be a better starting point than not. This just kind of shows, again, it's difficult to, and I'm preaching to the choir on it, but it's, you're planning today for 2 years from now kind of thing. So what is your approach on how to best steward the sprout year relative to what is your current cash position today? What can you afford to invest in the sprout year? What does this year's pricing look like? How do I balance my sprout year investment with my crop year development costs? It's to work with the 2-year window. Every decision that you guys make has a multi-year impact. So when I say paid pounds, is what I mean. So we've got, when we look at our yield potential, then we have our standing crop, then we have our harvested volume, then we have our delivered volume, then we have our paid volume. So again, it's interesting to know kind of what the differential is there, because if you're again, with that simple equation there, the cost and the paid pounds, if you're dividing by your yield potential when you look at your cost of production rather than your actual paid pounds at the end of the day, that's going to skew your number. This slide here kind of breaks down cost of production. I think this is a useful slide when you look at, what impacts cost of production. Revenue drivers, cost drivers, structural drivers. So, revenue drivers, yield per acre. What's your harvest efficiency and your timing? That's going to impact your revenue, your grade, your quality, and then that initial payment and top-up payment. Cost drivers, again, you got your operational costs here, pollination, crop insurance type of programs, fertility, labor, equipment, and custom work. And I've come to learn that custom work is quite a large segment of this industry. Structural drivers, your stand maturity and stage, um, what level of production and development will you achieve? How long is it going to take to achieve? What scale and kind of economies of scale can you leverage? What is your debt position and how does that impact your overall decisions? Again, when you're looking at kind of that 2-year window and your sprout and your crop year, the discipline around that biennial cycle and the timeliness associated with your management activities to try to, again, make the most of your cost efficiencies and enhance your yields. So labor, I mean, you look at any business, agriculture or otherwise, labor will be one of the, if not the primary cost driver. So you've got, owner operator labor, owner doing the day-to-day work. You've got skilled long-term labor. You've got seasonal harvest support. You've got management labor. And you've got custom grow. And I understand that, there's a large portion of Nova Scotia blueberry land that is custom grown. So then when we think about these custom growers, again, that cycle, you've got certain windows of time. So these guys are needing to gear up to try to do the best they can for their landowner clients and kind of keep within those production windows. But then in order for them to try to retain their skilled labor, how do they kind of balance out those costs when it's not as active of a period for the wild blueberries? So that creates complexity for the custom growers as well. When it comes to cost of production, I'm a big advocate of trying to push yields. When you look at the impact of yield reduction on cost of production, it's not just kind of uniform. So you're not going to see if your yield goes down by 20%, your cost of production's going to go up by 20%. It actually goes up by 25%. So if we can drive yields, be very aware of yields, that is a good lever within your cost of production considerations. So it all comes down to cost benefit at the end of the day. And again, that's where we're talking about having effective assumptions, garbage in, garbage out. If we don't have the quality information, we can't effectively measure a true cost benefit here. So, should we reduce pollination to save X dollars per acre, or do I have the availability to enhance the pollination, which will then, based on my awareness, increase my yield by, just kind of throwing a number in there, but trying to be able to comfortably measure the cost benefit of these decisions. Should I be, aggressive on my sprout year inputs? And how will that actually input my yield for the following year? Should I be deferring maintenance to save money, or will that preventative maintenance actually protect an entire harvest? That we can't effectively measure cost benefit if we don't have good information. So pollination, again, when it comes to pollination, it's not just about making, and I can appreciate, it's not just about making, okay, should I be spending money on pollination? It's, can I get a reliable supply of pollination for when I need it? But pollination is just a great example of something to look at in terms of cost benefit. So again, here, like I say, the windows of time and being able to execute in those windows of time is a part of your costs. How can we make sure that we apply our inputs in the most effective window, pollination in the most effective window, harvest in the most effective window, while trying to deal with the externalities of the weather and of things that are outside of our control? How can we operate within those prime windows to reduce costs, increase increase yields. This slide here really dives into what I was talking about, trying to look at a farm level cost of production compared to maybe a field level cost of production. So you see here you've got A to E. The y axis would be, you know, your cost of production per pound. So those first 5 there are quite low, and then you've got your average because you've got those other 4 that are a little bit higher. So really your farm cost of production is masking what are your true your strong fields, and helping to know the productivity of your fields, and having variable rate, variable consideration on your input and operational investment decisions to try to leverage yields where you can actually push yields is important in your cost of production. So this is kind of looking at, again, that seasonality side, or looking at custom hire compared to your own capacity there. So along the bottom, it would be the reliability of the access to the custom work, and then the time and criticality along the top. As long as there's a level of high reliability there, but if there's a level of low reliability in a certain task or based on your geographic area, low reliability and high time and criticality, you should really consider owning that capacity on your operation. And then again, you would need to factor that into your cost of production. So this, I mean, like I say, I'm in Kemptville. I work a lot with apple farms, and we deal with the same kind of development stage, and it's a number, and same thing with vineyards and all these kind of multi-year development crops. And something to really ensure that you're aware of, and a number that I keep trying to push on with growers, is how much does it cost you per year to manage an immature acre of X? Because you've got costs that are flying out year over year over year, and then it's not like all of a sudden it's boom, we're right up to full production. And you do have that time of maturity stage before you can get to full production. And again, with the wild blueberry, from what I understand, is that we might not always reach a full production level. So trying to understand kind of where that field's potential is another layer of complexity that you're working with there. But it is important that you capture that whole development window in thinking about your full economic cost of production from a field level. So you've got a number of things within the operation. Then you've got these externalities that can impact you, that do change your cost of production. Unfortunately, we talk about interest rates. That's depending on how much debt you have, that can materially impact your overall cost of production and general business cash flow. And then if you're tightened up on the interest rate side, and we're trying to make a decision on inputs, and our cash flow is looking really tight, we might then cut back on that, and then we might miss out on the yield, and then maybe that year is a great price. And so it's just, it can become a snowball, and you're dealing in a global market. So that impacts you here at home. And we've got volatility of the climate, which we experienced last year, and it seems like every year it's just a different thing. And then, you know, kind of dealing with new trade and tariff considerations and what that looks like in different industries. All these things are 100% out of our control. I mean, with interest rates, a person could say, okay, well, I can have a fixed interest rate for a longer period of time, and that is true. But still, a lot of these things are very outside of your control, but they do impact your profitability. So what can you do to try to kind of mitigate your operation from those impacts? This reinforces the operational cost of production, operational break even. You know, we got our bills paid, but slowly over time, our equipment, our land stewardship is starting to degrade. And then we kind of get into the economic break even costs where, okay, we're kind of looking at paying ourselves or allocating our market rate hourly costs. We're covering depreciation. We're starting to cover development costs within our cost of production. And then kind of the generational sustainability is you've got that stuff covered, and how can you start to fund without fully levering on the expansions? This year I think just demonstrates strong yields, and basically it's showing the different prices from low to high, yield from poor to strong. In in any case, obviously a strong yield is going to be kind of your best mitigation there. Average yield, we can still be kind of in a danger zone at kind of a floor price, expected price. Poor yield, it's going to generally be a tough year. And I mean, arguably, if you have a strong yield and the floor price is really low, maybe it's not above all the thresholds, but again, I just really want to push how can we push our yields and efficiently steward the operation to be kind of hitting those windows of time, leveraging proper input usage, and pushing yields. This is just an example. Like when we talk about on-farm tracking, again, I keep on saying it: garbage in, garbage out, garbage in, garbage out, and it can only take a couple weeks of not properly calculating, or maybe you have the information but it's just sitting kind of on your windshield there, whatever. But what can you put in place that will work for your operation to classify expenses allocated to certain fields, labor attributed to activities on certain fields, yield associated with each field, and how can we get that on paper to review to make management decisions? This is just kind of there's some tips in there on how to define your enterprise, your units, your different costs and things. And I can make these slides available if anybody's interested in them. Here's some things that stand out in terms of common misses when it comes to cost of production, not including depreciation. Really not having a good handle on how much time things truly take for your operators, for yourselves, and allocating the appropriate time to your cost of production. Those are really the top three in terms of what are some things that stand out that get missed. You could be ignoring sprout year costs. There's a number of different areas to go wrong and miss here. Again, it's like this. You guys are flooded by data, and I don't know how much more data we really need. It's just we need good data that we can actually use to make decisions. There's data everywhere, but how can you use it? I really think that the big one is kind of pushing yields, looking at your field blocks compared to other fields and how those are developed and what the potential is per field. Using your cost of production to make management decisions about things like hives, assuming that you can get access to them, looking at equipment decisions and how that impacts you, thinking about funding a new development on a field, but is that going to come at the expense of being able to apply the appropriate amount of inputs on your existing fields or during your sprout year? There's a number of considerations and decisions to be made that you guys face on a day-to-day basis, where maybe some of it's coming from feel, or maybe this is just how we've always done it. But if you can capture more of the information, you can enhance your profitability. That's really all that I've got for you here. If you're interested in talking about your particular operation, you can just scan that little QR code there and set up a time to chat. Otherwise, if there are any questions, I'm happy to field those right now. Yes, sir.
Um, I know the variable costs and other fixed costs per acre is going to vary from field to field. Um, the provincial averages would be, I think, very helpful to growers for self-awareness,
Mm-hmm.
as well as dealing potentially with the government and processors. Are you planning on taking this project a step further for us to have some provincial averages to work with?
Yeah, no, and that's a great question. We just completed a cost of production study for the Grape Growers Association of Nova Scotia, and there had been a legacy study that was, done about 10 years ago. I'm not sure what your existing benchmark state is, but from what I understand, there's going to be some work done with Perennia, and I saw in your guys' newsletters, there is a priority on, establishing a benchmark, also doing a number of different exercises and opportunities to discuss cost of production a little bit more. So from what I understand, that is on your association's priority list. Anybody else?
I have one for you. Um, in tracking a lot of data, so there's a lot of numbers and a lot of calculations that need to be made in order to fully understand your cost of production. What are your recommendations in terms of tools and software that wild blueberry growers could use?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's gonna be, operation to operation. Some people are, more savvy with software. Some people are more pen and paper. From what I've seen, the best systems are more so systems that have been kind of developed internally as a management team within something like maybe an Excel or something that is kind of made for that particular operation, because we can't always slam the square in a circle. I have a two-person development team that's actively working on different forms of software. One of them is trying to, because again, too, it comes down to we need information for ourselves, and we're going to often be getting information from our employees. So trying to make sure that they're appropriately tracking the information is another layer there. So trying to figure out how we can get the whole team on board. So really, I think the best way to do it is kind of farm by farm, really diving in and working together to put together a system that works. Yes, sir.
I recall that some years ago we did a cost of production uh, analysis with New Brunswick and PEI. And at that time, it was a whole farm cost of production because a lot of blueberry growers, maybe in New Brunswick, for example, were also dairy farmers or snow crab fishers or lobster. And they had a lot of equipment, which they had to have anyway for those other farm activities. So uh, anyway, that was the question I had.
Well, and that's a difficulty. Like, so for instance, within the grape grower study that we just did, there are a number of farms that are multi-commodity, and they'll have access to a large amount of temporary foreign workers, and then essentially they're implementing the grapes within their entire business in order to make their labor more efficient because they need X amount of guys anyway. So trying to understand if that is actually the most efficient way for kind of a standalone operation is quite difficult. And really all you can do is try to break it down to a per activity time compared to what was actually paid out time to measure the labor efficiencies. But yeah, no, trying to isolate, say with equipment that is multi-commodity use, you can go ahead and you can try to isolate based on hours used within the particular enterprise. But again, let's say, I'm not sure if it's a piece of equipment that you would use for this operation over here, and it's, large, and maybe you've got some blueberries here that can also leverage that equipment. But if you just had the blueberries, you wouldn't have that large piece of equipment, and it can create efficiencies, or, if we're allocating hours to that large piece of equipment, it can skew the cost of production. So that's where kind of, it is important to have quantitative numbers, but also qualitative explanations or notes in how that's been measured. But that's a great point. Like I say, I'm here. I'm going to stay for lunch. Anybody has any questions or just wants to chat, just be sitting right over there, and happy. I might be over by the coffee. If I'm having coffee past 12, please somebody stop me. That's doctor's orders. So anyway, yeah, just looking forward to getting some time with you all today. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Patrick.